Jack, right on time. Good to see you. Who can name the tune? Or at least the artist? DeMarcus, yo. Anybody got this? How are things in Portugal? Layla, I see you. I'm going to bring you in just a second. Okay. L Haas 9 says Rod Stewart, controversial figure in rock and roll history. Somebody said Jagger. That's a pretty good guess. My limited understanding of rock history is that at one point there was a real competition between Mick Jagger for, call it what you will, the king of rock and roll. And believe it or not, for those who don't know their rock and roll history, Rod Stewart was really a contender at one point. The Small Faces, that scene coming out of England, producing some great records. I mean, this is an amazing song. And yet that wasn't the trajectory that he was able to maintain. He then made some records that were not great rock and roll records, and the Stones continued their ascent and their climb and their dominance of rock and roll for many of us, at least. But there was a golden moment for Rod Stewart. That just happens to be what's on 92.3 FM right now as I turn on the radio at the same time that I turn on the live stream. Hope everyone is having a great day. Thank you for joining us yesterday for Jacqueline Westman and Project PPE. This is one of the real bright spots that has emerged in the midst of our current darkness. Here you have someone who refused to just be pissed off and frustrated that we can't get the personal protective equipment to frontline healthcare workers, and so took it upon herself to produce that PPE with other designers, folks in the fashion industry, displaced garment workers, and they're shipping out thousands of face masks and the garments that healthcare workers need to wear in order to protect themselves, their families, and the patients for whom they care. What a positive story coming out of this. And I'm so proud to know Jacqueline, to count her as a friend, and for you all to have the chance to meet her. And I just checked in with her. She said that together we raised $5,000 on the Instagram Live yesterday. So all of you generous mofos who reached into your pockets and gave $5, $25, $100, maybe more, helped Jacqueline cumulatively reach her $10,000 goal so that she can buy the material, hire the workers, produce the PPE, and get it to those hospitals in New York, and I think she mentioned Arizona, and in LA, where these frontline healthcare workers otherwise will not be able to protect themselves or the public. So kudos to you all, and our gratitude to Jacqueline for being on the Instagram Live, sharing her story, and allowing us to be part of that. By that same token, and I'm going to put this link up if I can figure out how to do this. All right. Let's see. I posted that. And now I'm going to pin it. At the bottom of this screen, there is a link for El Pasoans Fighting Hunger. I sent an email out to our national list. So all of you who have subscribed somewhere down the road or were subscribed to our email list, you got an email from me yesterday announcing some really exciting news. In El Paso, our food bank got a $1 million matching grant, meaning that every donation that comes in up to $1 million will be matched dollar for dollar, meaning this community stands to raise about $2 million total to fund our food bank, to purchase the food that we then need to distribute to people who are hungry at a record level. We haven't seen this probably since the Great Depression, and this community stepped up, and every one of you who clicked on the button to donate also were part of stepping up. And some of you don't live in El Paso or live in Texas, but wanted to donate nonetheless. We have raised so far just under $28,000 over the last 24 hours for the El Paso Food Bank. That's the power of people, the people who are part of this Instagram Live, the people who are part of Powered by People, the folks who are on our list and are just good human beings who want to help when there's an opportunity to do so. So I want to say a big thank you to everyone who's done that. And if you haven't been able to donate to El Pasoans Fighting Hunger yet, there's a link right here at the bottom. Donate $5, $10, $25, whatever you can afford to donate, if you can afford to donate anything at all. And for that, I am grateful. A couple of other things, and then I'm going to introduce our guest, Leila Melendez, who is the CEO of the local workforce board. This is the agency that is tasked with helping people who are unemployed find work. And if ever there were a need for those services, it is right now. And so we want to find out what that's like for her in this 6-county region of West Texas, including El Paso, and perhaps extrapolate from this experience what it's like in other parts of the country. She's here to answer your questions. There's also a question button right here at the bottom of this screen. And if you push that, ask a question, I'll try my best to make sure that we ask that of her. Some quick hits. People of Wisconsin, God bless you and God protect you. A very cynical, callous decision by some of the Republican leadership in that state means that elections are going forward today in the midst of the greatest pandemic in our lifetimes. People have to choose between their democracy, deciding who's going to represent them, and their health. And many people are sacrificing potentially their health to get out there and go vote. They should not have been put in this position in the first place. Our thanks to the Wisconsin Democratic Party and everyone who tried to get this election postponed or have some means to vote by mail instead of voting in person. This is, in effect, a form of voter suppression because it makes people risk their personal health and perhaps their lives in order to exercise their right to vote. But for those who went out there to vote, nonetheless, grateful for your civic participation and your civic duty, and sorry that you had to do it. And I wish that we had been able to prevail in that. But this is a forewarning of what is to come in the months ahead as we go into the November 2020 elections. Harbor no illusions about this president or the Republican majority in Congress putting public health and safety and our well-being ahead of their political careers. The kind of voter suppression that you saw take place in Wisconsin, that's a harbinger of what is going to come in November. I think this is the right time for all of us, regardless of your party affiliation, to ask our representatives in Congress that whatever the next stimulus package or relief bill that comes through Congress, attached to that should be some kind of voting rights provision that allows us to vote by mail so that we don't expose ourselves to the threat of coronavirus and COVID-19. Something for all of us to be thinking about and to be working on right now. Having said that, let me share some of the latest numbers that we have from the Centers of Disease Control. In the United States, we have 387,000 cases. Now, these are tested and presumed cases, I guess. We have 12,285 of our fellow Americans who have lost their lives during this pandemic. My belief is that both of these reflect the direction and an indication of how bad this is, but in no way comprehensively measure the toll. Many more cases than we know about because we just don't have enough tests, and many more deaths, unfortunately, than have been reported thus far. Globally, we're closing in on 1.5 million cases around the globe, over 81,000 deaths documented so far. Again, same holds true for those global cases. We don't have enough tests. We don't have enough documentation. This is only an indication. And in Texas, 8,400 cases and still under, thank God, 200 deaths so far. So the imperative for all of us, and certainly those in positions of public trust and power, is let's get tests for every single person who should be tested so that we can trace their contacts and isolate those who have been infected to stop the spread of coronavirus. Let's get the personal protective equipment so that Jacqueline isn't in a factory right now in LA having to produce it at her own cost and through our donations. As generous and amazing as that is, this is a job for government, and government should get on the job. And then ventilators. We know that some states like New York that have been hit the hardest still don't have the number of ventilators that they need. So those are the three things we need to continue to ask those who hold these positions of power to work on: the tests, the PPE, and the ventilators. One last note, and I brought it up on yesterday's show, but it's a point that bears repeating. Black Americans are getting hit much harder than any other group in this country. And that has been true for as long as we have been a country, for anything that you want to measure: maternal mortality, diabetes, asthma, heart disease, you name it. It is a reflection of the unequal treatment of our fellow Americans in this country, but now taking a very devastating and deadly toll. Our thanks to public servants like Mayor Lightfoot in Chicago and others who are drawing attention to this, so that we have the public policy that can address this, so that we are actively saving lives in communities where those lives are being lost all too frequently. I wanted to make sure that everybody knows about that, have that on your radar, and are able to act on that. Okay, I'm now going to bring on Leila Melendez, someone that I got to know when I was a member of the El Paso City Council and with whom I worked at City Hall, who then moved over to the Workforce Commission, where she worked with another former colleague, Joyce Wilson, who's one of my all-time heroes in life. She was the city manager in El Paso when I was on the city council. I don't have to tell you all, a lot of people are out of work right now. A lot of people are filing for unemployment. A lot of people are having a hard time making ends meet. They have a lot of questions and a lot of uncertainty in their lives. I'm hoping that by asking Leila to come on the show today, she can answer some of our questions, dispel some of the confusion that exists, and hopefully help us understand the path going forward for how people can apply for benefits, how people can get back into the workforce, and perhaps what some of this federal legislation that's coming down the pike to us is going to mean for those who are unemployed right now in El Paso and around the country. So with that, let me bring on the great Leila Melendez from El Paso, Texas. Here she is. Leila, it says you're coming on. Get some intro music from 92.3. All right, Leila, how are you?
Hi, good. How are you?
I'm doing
Good
great.
to see you.
Yeah,
Good.
really good to see you. So I was telling folks we used to work together at City Hall.
Yeah. It's like really, you did some great work when you were on city council. You and some of the other folks, and along with Joyce, it was really a big moment in our history. So yeah.
I'm so glad you chose to say that instead of a number of other things you could have talked about in terms of our time at City Hall together. No, we both got to be part of a really great team. These amazing civil servants at City Hall, many of whom who are still there, working really tough, very often thankless jobs. Other folks on City Council who helped to, I think, take El Paso to another level when it came to public policy, and feel very lucky that I got to be a part of that. So you are the newly named CEO of the El Paso Workforce Commission. What's the official title of the Workforce Commission in El Paso?
So our agency here in El Paso, we're a nonprofit, but we are like an extension of the state. So the state agency is the Texas Workforce Commission, but here locally, our official name is Workforce Solutions Borderplex, which really defines the whole region. We serve the 6 counties in far west Texas: El Paso, Culberson, Hudspeth, Jeff Davis, and Presidio and Brewster.
Okay. And tell us, I'm going to show some charts that you all published recently that explains by the numbers what we're seeing in El Paso. I picked this up on the website El Paso Matters, a new news website in El Paso. But before I do, just give me your impression. What are you seeing now? You're new in this job, but you're not new to
Right.
workforce issues. Tell us what you're seeing.
You know, it's really unfortunate, and it's a lot of things, right? It's very scary, and it's sad. also, because we were doing really well. I think not just here, but across the country. The economy was doing well. We had record unemployment here in El Paso for so long, and we were really enjoying that.
What was the unemployment at?
We were at 3.7, 3.9 over the last several months.
I don't know if you can see this graph, but my face is, I don't know how to move this, but I'm covering up some of the bars, but the very low, small, tiny lines are the unemployment rate, you know, going from left to right. And then you just see it shoot up dramatically over the month of March. Can you tell us what some of those numbers are?
Yeah, so we released new numbers last week, and to give you a kind of perspective, the first 2 weeks in March of this month, we were at around 300 unemployment filings a week. Okay, so for the whole week, we were at about 300 people filing for unemployment. And the week of March 15th, over 3,400 people filed. The week of the 22nd, 9,500 people filed. And last week, over 6,000 people filed. So we went from an average of about 300 filings a week to, you know, it's like 7,000 a week. And so for this month, for the last several weeks, 5 weeks, we are at 19,000 people that have filed for unemployment. It is just jarring. It is really unfortunate and really scary and sad. So right now, that's the urgency, is just making sure that we can connect folks to file for unemployment and get on that benefit system and try to help them out, you know, with some relief as soon as possible.
I'm trying to bring up these graphs, but it's not going to work. But one of the graphs I was going to show is what sectors of the economy have been most affected. And no surprise, but, you know, food service, restaurants, entertainment,
Right.
I think was the biggest single cohort, like 31, 32%. So if someone's watching this and the small business for whom they worked has been shut down, can no longer keep them on the payroll, they're now unemployed, what is their next step?
So right now, I think the next step, and we're trying to balance that. We want to be really careful, right? There's options for them, but we know that people are really considering that option. Their urgency is to get those benefits, make sure that they apply, but then really take pause and say, is this the right time to go out and find work? We have the systems and we're in touch with employers to try to help them find work, but we know that we are under this order and we want people to stay healthy first and foremost. That's really our priority as well. And we took that approach with our actual centers. We wanted to be sure that our staff were healthy and safe, because if they weren't, then they weren't going to be able to answer the phones for the people that really needed us. So right now, luckily, 100% of our services are remote, and they can reach us. We're all working from home, but we're trying to just answer the phone and be there to answer as many questions as possible for folks.
But for someone unfamiliar with the process, they've just been let go. How do they file for unemployment? I mean, how do they work with you?
So there's two ways. One is it's all through the state. It's centralized at the state, and it's through two options, either through the TWC website, the Workforce Commission website, or the phone number. There's an 800 number, and I'll get that for you in a second. And so there's two ways. And what I want for people to consider, and I think everybody understands, it's not just a state issue, it's not just a local, or it's across the country. Everybody is slamming the system. You know, think of the Texas Workforce Commission as a department store, right? It's this huge agency, this huge place, and there's different departments in there. We are just one department, but the unemployment division is another department. They're at the front door, and everyone is jamming through that front door. There's lines out the front door. Everybody's trying to get in. So it's really stretching the system. But at the state level, they are adding a ton of capacity as quickly as they can. So one, call to file unemployment, or do it online. And so since we're in mountain time, we might have better luck a little later in the afternoon or in the evening, when the rest of Texas is you know, an hour ahead of us. So we're trying to give people that tip, but just keep trying. And once they are, you know, once they apply, then the process is expedited. That was one of the actions that Governor Abbott took to waive a 10-day investigative period so that folks can start to get their benefits as soon as possible, expedited. Hopefully within 2 weeks, they can start to get their benefits.
And I know you're on the workforce side and trying to find people work, but I'm seeing some questions come up in the stream, and then I'll take some from the question box. But someone said if you're in the gig economy, if you work for Uber or DoorDash, you don't have a traditional full-time job with the traditional protections that many of us count on in a full-time job, how does that work?
They should still apply. So stimulus 3, so there were 3 stimulus packages passed so far. Stimulus 2 is the one that rolled out the unemployment benefits and added some benefit and some relief there, but it left out those independent contractors. But Stimulus 3, luckily and of good fortune, they included independent contractors. So folks that get paid a 1099 or folks like in gig jobs, they can. So long as there is, now the caveat is, so long as that employer pays payroll taxes for them, right? So the unemployment benefits come out of the taxes that an employer pays into. So a small business, whether it's a small business or large business, if that employer pays into the unemployment system, then there's a place for those benefits to get paid from. So that's really important to know. So if they have just a gig economy or a gig job, and there isn't somebody paying into that unemployment system, they likely won't be eligible.
Got you. I'm going to bring up a few questions from some of the viewers right now, but one I have for you while I'm looking for them. Who is hiring right now? Like I see some national companies, Amazon hiring, 100,000, Walmart, other big employers or big corporations, but at a local level, who, if anyone, is hiring here?
We just actually this afternoon sent out a press release, and we've done this weekly in the last couple of weeks with a list of some of those employers here locally that are hiring. Obviously, some of the grocery stores, some distribution centers are hiring. So we've got, and also some call centers. A lot of call centers are now, you can work from home. You can be a work at home call agent. So there's a variety of those types of jobs, work from home, or those types of companies or businesses that need, that are like, frontline workers at the grocery stores or some of the retail, like at some of the pharmacies. So, they can go to our website and find those, but you'll also see quite a bit of media on that. There's some of the stations that have picked it up of some employers that are hiring, and folks have the option. There's a difference of what's going on right now, whether some people are willing and interested in some of those jobs, but there are a few opportunities here locally.
Yeah, I think you kind of touched on this. Skylar's asking about part-time employees. I'm assuming it's a similar answer to the gig economy employees.
So part-time employees, if there is her question that if she was a part-time and she
no longer has that job.
Yeah, she should file. So one of the things we're telling folks is file anyway. If you can get through either online or on the phone, file anyway. Don't opt yourself out. Don't try to figure out whether you are really, yes or not, going to be found eligible. Just apply. And if you're denied, appeal it, make the case for it, and then go from there. But don't hesitate to apply. Because it's really going to depend on how many hours they've worked over the last base period and what that amount of wages that they report. That'll determine whether they are going to be eligible at all, and then for how much.
Couple questions, and these track some of what I've seen in the question box. First question: what do you want to see in the next phase of federal legislation that comes through to address this? The headlines we're reading now is that Congress and the White House are not done, and they shouldn't be done. $2 trillion is not enough to address this. What was missing from what you saw so far from a workforce perspective that you want to see in the next round?
I think one of the things that I'd like to see has to do with the workforce system itself and a lot of the programs that we manage. There's a wide range of programs that we run through different agencies for different populations and different reasons, but there's a lot of strings attached. Like, people can get access to these benefits and they can keep those benefits so long as they do all of these things. Well, some of those things sometimes make it a little harder. So I'd like to see, and a lot of those things have been relaxed because of this situation. For example, right now for unemployment, historically, once you filed for unemployment, you had to log so many hours of proving that you're looking for a job. Well, right now, no one can look for a job. They want everybody to stay home. So that requirement has been waived. And there's been a bunch of things that have just been kind of tossed out. I'd like for them to really reconsider what is really necessary and not just put everything back status quo. This is really a good time for us to look at whether the workforce system has really been effective in helping people really, I mean effective, I mean like life-changing. There's some data that we looked at people that had filed for unemployment this year that also filed for unemployment the previous 2 years. So they've gone through the cycle, and the whole point of a workforce system is to help you now and help you so good that we never see you unemployed ever again. So I think those are the things that I'd like to see in the stimulus for. I don't know that we're going to have time to go that deep because it's pretty complicated, but I think it's worth at least having those conversations right now. We're not going to return to here in El Paso March 13th. We're going to have a whole different world here, and I think we need to figure out how to best serve it and not just go back to the way that it was pre-pandemic.
Are you able to talk a little bit about, and this is a little bit outside of the purview of your job, but what you want that world to look like? I mean, some things that seem obvious to me that this crisis has laid bare is, folks who aren't able to depend on a living wage and are scraping together with 2 or 3 jobs. Already life was really tough for them. And when something like this hits, there's almost no safety net, no savings upon which they can rely. Universal health care, another one. If we just had that and it wasn't a question and it was a right and we could depend on that. Housing, we're seeing that around the country, some in El Paso. We talked to somebody who has been homeless in Las Vegas about the challenge there. These are things beyond the response to COVID-19 I would love for this country to be able to address in a really meaningful way, because it's just the right thing to do, and it fortifies us against the next disaster, whatever that is and whatever shape it comes in. Any thoughts from your workforce perspective on what you'd like to see?
Yeah, we have had these conversations with boards across the country and advocating for some reform to the laws, because here in El Paso, an example, we just came off of a really great conversation that the Congresswoman hosted, El Paso 2.0, and kind of how are we going to transform our economy. And it really forced us to look at our wages and our education levels. And so that's where we were focused on. But one of the things that I think the system can be improved is we've got a large population of folks that they do get their high school diploma. They get their high school diploma, they've graduated high school or their GED, and they go to work, right? So they get their high school diploma, they go to work. There isn't a post-secondary, there isn't an enrollment into a tech school or into a college, but they're working, but they're working and they're generating an income, so they don't qualify for our programs. They don't qualify for upskilling. They can't afford to go back to school on their own. They've got a family, they've got responsibilities. They're making X number amount, maybe just right above the living wage. So they're okay, but they're not going to be able to afford any kind of post-secondary skill level to move them up the ladder, move them up into a different career trajectory. And they don't qualify for the benefits that we provide. That's a huge disconnect for us, I think, because we want people to move into a higher education, into post-secondary. How are they going to do that if they can't afford it? So I think our programs are income-based. So if we had some flexibility on helping individuals that have an income, not just that don't have any income, but have change the income thresholds, that would be a big game changer to helping those folks get into some kind of post-secondary, some other skill to help them be like multi-skilled, and they have more options available to them.
When you're saying that, I cannot help but think about unions and, unions who really struggle in Texas. We are a quote unquote right to work state, which makes it harder for unions to organize. And one of the things that I've learned as I've listened to union members is not only is it a fight for wages, and earned benefits, but it's also the skills and the training and the education. You mentioned those of us who don't pursue education beyond high school, but they want to be able to have the skills and training to be able to not just earn that living wage, and that's important, right? That's fundamental, but also to be able to add value to whatever they're working on, to have that purpose and that function and that pride that comes with it. And unions really seem uniquely capable of providing that. And again, in communities like El Paso and states like Texas, it's a little bit of a struggle relative to other states. So I've got to think that that's part of the solution, as well as what you just described with changing the thresholds for the workforce board. So I like that. I think those are some things that we should be thinking about after we get through this, and making sure that people are okay. One of the last things I wanted to bring up, Amy and I have been volunteering at the food bank in El Paso, and we are struck by the number of people who are there because you've sent them there. They're folks, typically younger folks who perhaps were having a hard time already finding a job, and I think are being paid through the workforce board to work at the food bank. And they're just really amazing young people working their tails off from 8 a.m. or maybe they get there a little bit before till the end of the day, till the last car has come through. And you know that thousands of cars are coming through. The line stretches miles long. So I want to thank you for doing that and using the authority and discretion you have to fill a real desperate need that we have here in El Paso. Are other workforce boards taking your lead in other parts of the state?
I hope so. I've shared that story with them. So these students, we started out with these students when this hit. These were students that were in a skills program, and they're getting an education, like they're being trained, but they were also in a work experience. So they were working for some local employers. Well, when this happened, they couldn't go to work anymore. So they were just learning the skill. So the food bank called us and said, you know, we have this need, how can we help? And I said, let's get those same students, those same youth, and let's put them over here. I can't make a cash donation to the food bank, but I can pay for those wages, which is just as good of a donation. So we started out with like 10 students that Saturday, and we're now at 40 people, not just young students, but some of our adult population. Awesome. So we've got 40 people.
I love that.
And I've shared this story with other workforce boards, and I told them, you've got some community organizations that really need you. You can subsidize that wage, just like we were doing for this employer. Now we just move it to another employer. So I've shared that with them. I hope that they're doing that. And as many more opportunities as we can do that right now, we're going to take it.
Oh, that's such a good story. And I love, because like you, I have so much pride in this community. I love when we lead on something really important like this. So you make us proud on this and really everything that you have been doing at what I've got to think is the toughest moment to take on this responsibility as CEO for the Workforce Board in El Paso. But we're so grateful to you, and we hope that you will continue to keep us apprised of, you know, your progress, and also just make sure that we have a real honest look at what we face here, something that you and I have not seen in our lifetimes, and maybe we haven't seen in the lifetime of this country since the Great Depression. So we wish you all the luck in the world.
Thank you very much for having me. And if anybody has any questions or comments, they can go to our website, borderplexjobs.com. Our information to reach us by phone or by email or the other websites, a ton of resources are on there. And if you all have any questions or comments on ideas on what you want to see, what economy you want to see in El Paso post-pandemic, let us know, because that's what we're here for. We're here to build that. So I appreciate the time, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Leila. Gracias. Right. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Oh, that was so good. Leila, thank you for joining us, and to all of you for being here, hearing what she has to say. Not everyone who's following this feed is in El Paso, but I think much of what she just said applies to workforce considerations in other parts of the country. I love what she had to say about skills training, like the idea that unions could play a part in this. Liked her ideas on what we want to see in future federal legislation to meet the economic effects of this pandemic and crisis that we're seeing in the country right now. And also, I just love that she's using her authority to fill a gap at our food banks, where many of those who are unemployed have to go to be able to feed themselves right now. So Leila, thank you. And there's Again, there's a link right here at the bottom of this feed if you want to make a donation to El Pasoans Fighting Hunger. That's our local food bank. Please do so. They just got $1 million matching grant, but it's only activated when people make donations. So they will match every dollar you donate up to $1 million. And grateful for everyone who's already donated and everyone who's considering donating right now. Lela today, Jacqueline yesterday, so many of the guests that we've had on have been these rays of hope, cause for optimism, a source of inspiration in a really dark moment. And I use this phrase that my friend Luli shared with me in an email yesterday: in a room full of crap, there's got to be a pony in here somewhere. President Trump doing so much damage to this country, making it so hard for us to mount the response that we deserve. The people who don't get frustrated by this, who don't let it get them down, who instead rise to the challenge and the occasion and match the moment. Jacqueline making the PPE, Lela deploying these students paid by the Workforce Commission to the food bank, folks who are volunteering at the food bank or donating to the food bank. You all make me so proud and give me so much hope, and I am so, so grateful for you. Tomorrow on our show, speaking of somebody who can make us hopeful, we're going to have Lisa Delantoni, and she is pictured here in this graphic. Cynthia is just texting me the same graphic right now. Lisa Delantoni is a good friend who lives in Evanston and is in the Evanston, Chicago area. We've really kind of gone around the horn from El Paso to DC to LA to Missouri to Dallas to Houston. A lot more ground to cover, but we're going to be going up to Chicago, Evanston tomorrow. Lisa's going to talk about the intersection of the arts and our response to this pandemic. To be an artist right now, what it means to be able to connect people through art. And beyond that kind of highfalutin goal of the conversation, she's just an incredibly entertaining person to listen to and to talk with. So hope that you will join us as well for that tomorrow. So going through your questions right now, this is a question from Doanasaur. Will Hunt and Foster, these are the folks who put up the $1 million in El Paso for the food bank, will they match donations regardless of what link you use to donate? Absolutely. However you get the funds in, if you want to drop off a check, although you probably shouldn't do that at this point, stay at home, use the internet, but whatever way you get it to them is fine. We sent out an email yesterday. You can use the link in that email. You can use the link right here at the bottom of the screen, and we'll get that to you if you follow us on other channels. But yes, they'll match it. All right. This is a really good question. I'm sorry, Caitlin, I didn't ask it when Lela was on. What kind of jobs would you like to come to El Paso? What kind of strength does El Paso workforce location have? Well, shit. Lela, I almost need to get you back on to answer this one. But Caitlin, I love the question. Would certainly love higher paying, higher skill, higher value jobs in El Paso. And I think the path to get there is to improve access to education. So pre-K through 12, it means that college is affordable for anyone who chooses to go. But it also means, and I'll repeat this point, it also means that we have strong unions, which in addition to fighting for wages and earned benefits, also provide the skills training, education, and the value that so many people are looking for in their work. So appreciate that. Yeah, Jack DePrimo, always with the good questions. Cynthia, why don't we have Jack on and maybe just have a back and forth with Jack on one of our future live streams. Do you think a modern WPA, is that the Works Progress Administration, could offset unemployment numbers? That makes a lot of sense to me. And my understanding is that the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, and the President, or some member of his team, are talking about a potential $2 trillion infrastructure bill for this country. Again, going back to unions, what a great opportunity not only to employ union members, but to encourage more people to join the apprenticeship programs within unions, where you learn the skills and get the training you need that will last you a lifetime. But there may also be some kind of federal oversight of a WPA-like program. There are so many examples of these WPA projects from the 1930s in El Paso. I think Scenic Drive, which is this beautiful road that cuts across the edge of our mountain from which you can look out over El Paso and Juarez. I think that was a WPA project. The swimming hole in Balmorhea, the springs there, a WPA project. The Tomato Bowl in East Texas. You probably got examples where you are. But yeah, I think, we can give the lie to this idea that there are people who don't want to work and are going to use this. I've seen some of the comments come through about, people just want handouts. The folks that I've met who are out of work, nothing could be further from the truth. They don't want a handout, they want a job, and they want to have that purpose in their lives that they can work towards. And so whatever way we do it, WPA, infrastructure bill, direct cash payments to small businesses to keep people on the payrolls, let's do it. And let's give people the opportunity to work. I see Oregon Rainbow Etsy says, how can we get fair elections? Great question, and a great day to ask it when those jackasses in Wisconsin are making people go to the polls literally in person at a moment when all of us should be staying home and keeping 6-foot distance. I've seen pictures of the polling sites, and folks are not keeping 6-foot distance, they're keeping a foot distance maybe, and in some cases getting closer than that, packed into lines. This is crazy. The technology exists in the year 2020 to vote by mail, to vote by internet, and that's probably something that should be explored at this moment. But certainly to vote by mail or to be able to drop off ballots, but to have people wait in line in person is one of the most pernicious examples of voter suppression that we have before us right now. It is cynical, it's calculated, and it is going to undermine our democracy. And it should be addressed in any future stimulus or relief bills that come through Congress. We want to help the American people, and we want to do that economically. We want to do that with healthcare. We want to do it with ventilators, PPE, and tests. But we also want to make sure that there are free and fair elections. So, great question. Just reading your comments here. Sorry. Yeah, Jack's asking about coronavirus impacting the general election. Jack's asking about homeschooling. Let me just end with that. Good day in the O'Rourke House. Hope it has been the same for you wherever you are. Our kids are in distance learning programs with the public schools here in El Paso. Our youngest in elementary, our two oldest in middle school. For the youngest, it is more a function of Amy for the first part of the day and me the second part of the day overseeing the lessons and the writing and the math problems. Amy does the math, I do more the writing side. And throwing in some enrichment or some stuff that's not in the curriculum, like music and art classes that Amy and I are providing. We're able to cook meals at home, we're able to be together. And to my surprise, and I'm only speaking for myself, not everyone else, though we've been in the same house now for almost a month, we're not yet sick of each other. And I figured by this point we would be going absolutely nuts and stir crazy, but everyone's keeping it together. Amy has us on this schedule, which gives us some structure, some consistency, some predictability, some discipline, which helps the day go by and keeps them from blurring into one another. And I think that's been helpful. And then even though we have a very strict shelter in place order here in El Paso, for which I'm grateful, trails are closed, parks are closed, we still find a way to get outside, to walk our dog Artemis, to take bike rides. We went out to 5 Points this weekend, or just to get in the car sometimes and drive. We have a good friend, Janine. Happy birthday, Janine. Janine's celebrating her birthday today. And so we're all going to get in our cars and drive by her house later today and yell out birthday wishes to her. Things are good here. I know that things are really tough for a lot of people, though, in this country, and we especially think about people in New York or in Detroit or in parts of Alabama and even some rural communities where per capita you have some of the worst outbreaks of coronavirus right now. We know that people have lost family members. We know that people are at home, some of them watching this right now, who are sick or recovering or have yet to recover. And we just want all of you to know that we're thinking about you and we love you and we're sending you our strength and our power and our love right now. And we want you to come through this okay. We want this country to come through this okay. And it's going to be a function of all of us banding together, being good to one another, being smart about what we do, staying home, washing our hands obsessively, keeping our distance from one another, but also fighting for what we need and what we believe in. And that's, you know, we talked about Wisconsin today. That means fair elections where people can mail in their ballots. It means holding those in power accountable for the lack of tests and PPE and ventilators. And then it means getting behind people like Project PPE, Jacqueline Westman's group, or the El Paso Food Bank, or whoever is out there helping the people in need right now. Make sure that you're always involved in some group, some organization, some effort that is helping those who need it the most. Amy and I focusing on food banks. You focus on what you think is going to make the biggest difference, but make sure that you do it. All right, we'll be back tomorrow with Lisa Delantoni talking about the arts in the time of coronavirus. We'll see you all soon. Adios.